Welcome everybody to today's SQM Podcast. This is our second podcast here with Louis Christopher, our founder and CEO. Today we've got a bit of an interesting topic. We're going to be talking a little bit more about the individual groups that affect the property market. So your real estate agents, your buyer's agents, a little bit about mortgage brokers and lenders. And then also a little bit about underquoting, because it's something that, we know in the Australian property market does affect purchases of properties, but it's not we think spoken about enough. And it's something that we feel at SQM very strongly about. So Louis, I'll put the question to you first. Let's talk a little bit about real estate agents and buyer's agents.
Yeah.
What roles, firstly, to some of our audience, let's, explain the difference between the two of them. And then just a little bit about, what impact they have in the market.
Sure, Sam. So up front, real estate agents act for sellers. It's the sellers who actually engage the real estate agent to sell the home. And the real estate agent gets paid a commission once the home is sold. So it's in the agent's interest to basically get as many listings from sellers as possible, so they have a pipeline of sales. And then naturally, it's in their interest to sell the home. That's how they fundamentally get paid. Now, buyer's agents, as the name suggests, is basically a person who's acting in the best interest of the buyer. We don't see so many buyer's agents in Australia. They're actually more prominent in markets such as the United States. But nevertheless, it's an industry that has been increasingly growing in Australia. And once again, it's the buyer who how the buyer's agent fundamentally gets paid. It's really two factors. Firstly, they get normally a flat fee to begin with for their initial time. And then once the home is sold, they too often receive a commission.
Okay. And would you say in some ways, because we sort of look at real estate agents and buyer's agents, but, from my perspective, I like to look at, and my background, for those of the audience that don't know, I come from a lending and finance background. And so with regards to banks and mortgage brokers, that's sort of where my area of expertise comes in. Buyer's agents, from my perspective, mitigate risk in the purchase for the purchaser. So they're often looking for elements within the property that make it a sound buy or make it good value. So they generally give a lot of comfort, I would say, to banks and mortgage brokers, because they mitigate risk in the purchase. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would agree, but I think too that they're quite good with the property search. And I've found the best buyer's agents are the ones which they can actually pick up properties before they officially enter into the market, because they've built up a really good network of real estate agents. They can basically see these properties that are about to come onto the market and start negotiating very quickly. So they offer that function as well. Many take the view buyer's agents are good at trying to get the price down. Look, no doubt, buyer's agents, that's part of their job as well. But a market is a market, and buyer's agents have to operate within that market too. There's no magic pudding here when it comes to price. The housing market's actually rather efficient. But the buyer's agent will at least help you ensure you're not getting ripped off.
And obviously, look, when you look at buyer's agents and real estate agents, they tend to be kind of at the front of the transaction. But let's look a little bit behind the transaction of most purchases of properties in Australia. There's usually a mortgage attached to these purchases. And also there's usually a bank or a lender behind the mortgage broker as well. Would you mind talking a little bit about what impact they have on the property market, mortgage brokers and lenders?
Yeah, sure. Well, without the financing, you're going to be very hard pressed to buy a home out there. Not many people have the cash in their pocket to buy a home outright. Very few indeed. So most of us need to borrow money when we're buying our home, especially our first home. You often said, or our first investment property. And so Mortgage brokers act as a bit of a go-between the banks and home borrowers. And increasingly, they have an important role there because I've personally found the banks increasingly difficult to deal with when you're trying to get a loan directly with a bank. The amount of documentation required nowadays compared to where it was 10 years ago, 20 years ago is phenomenal. And so mortgage brokers help a lot with that. Mortgage brokers also know which bank to go to depending on your own personal needs. So I think their role has been understated, and they're becoming more and more important in the whole chain of buying a property.
And I would absolutely agree on that. I sort of want to touch on a bit of a point that you made there, and this is around the banks being increasingly difficult to deal with as far as property p property purchases. Obviously, a few years ago before the Royal Commission, you sort of had a situation where banks were sort of more open to this. Would you and I mean, this is a bit of a long bow here, but would you say that obviously APRA's involvement around the Royal Commission in some ways has really changed the risk environment for banks in terms of borrowing? Because banks, we seem to see, are borrowing less and are more difficult to deal with. So a lot of new home buyers are actually going to the non-bank lenders at higher interest rates. How would you say this is affecting the property market?
Good question, Sam. Look, I think the bank's bread and butter is still residential mortgages. They've definitely walked away from commercial property mortgages, and they've been walking away from property development loans as well. So I've definitely noticed that. I think they're doing their utmost to keep their market share on residential mortgages, but they're not. I get the feeling they're shooting themselves in the foot in terms of the amount of paperwork now involved. Now, it's fair to say that there are scams out there. There's no question about that. And so, the onus is on the banks to stop their customers being caught up in a scam. And we are seeing more scams surrounding property in terms of properties being falsely for sale when they shouldn't be for sale at all. So, there is a role there for them to play. But I also think, too, they've been overstepping their mark in many respects. And indeed, I could tell you this personal story that happened to me that was covered a lot in social media some months back. Um, Look, yeah, if I were to go for a loan today, I would definitely be doing it via a mortgage broker as opposed to going straight to the bank. I will share one story that happened to me about 4 years ago, where I just simply was changing house, and the settlement of the changeover nearly didn't happen because the bank concerned didn't have its act together. So the settlement period was pretty generous. It was 8 weeks, and the bank didn't finally have its paperwork together until about 1 day out.
Yeah, wow.
And the real scary thing is, of course, is that if you don't meet settlement date, it means the seller, in theory, can walk away from the deal. And that scared the hell out of me, quite frankly. We did nothing wrong on our end. It was all the bank and just not having their act together, one department not speaking to the other department, and that nearly caused a settlement to nearly fall over.
Yeah, wow. Would you, and this is a bit of a hot button one, would you say that part of this, particularly around the paperwork and the efficiency with a lot of these banks, would you say there is some fault that could be lied there with how over-policed some of the banks are around a lot of these mortgages as well with the paperwork?
Oh, yeah, no question. Look, there's a lot of heat being placed on the banks right now from AUSTRAC and from APRA. The banks don't want to get sued. I understand that part, but I think overall they need to be more efficient. All the same, it's still the onus is on the bank saying, yes, they have to meet certain laws, but they can be more efficient in meeting those laws. There's no question about that.
We're going to pivot a little bit back to our real estate agents and our buyers agents. Let's talk a little bit about underquoting. Firstly, for those out there, do you want to just tell us a little bit about what underquoting is and why it's such a problem?
Yeah, well, first up, underquoting sucks. Uh, I mean, quite frankly, anyone that's been through it will know what I mean by that. It's just an absolute waste of time for buyers, and it's buyers that who are effectively the victims of this in terms of underquoting. So, what it is in effect is that you will see with a number of auctions, there might be a price guide given.
Mm.
That price guide uh, m- in some cases may well be deliberately lower than what the seller really wants to sell a property at. And it's all about trying to create interest in the property, that potentially this property could maybe be a bargain or fit within the price ranges of more buyers than what is the reality. Of course, what this means is for buyers who think that the property will sell within that price range, is that they go and spend money in terms of getting site inspections done, inspections. They spend a lot of time investigating into that property, only for the situation on the day of the sale that the seller had no intention whatsoever to sell at that price range advertised. That is called essentially underquoting, and it's illegal in a number of states, particularly in New South Wales and Victoria.
For clear reasons, because it obviously wastes so much time and causes, I guess, an undue rush towards a property. And
Oh, it's emotionally taxing, it's financially taxing, it wastes a lot of time, and it's not fundamentally fair. And I'm only too glad to see that it's been made illegal. There's been a bit of a lag in terms of laws coming in versus actual enforcement of the laws, but I'm glad to see, especially here in New South Wales now, that the Department of Fair Trade has been a lot more active of late.
I was going to ask, what are government bodies doing to stop this, and what can they do other than just saying it's illegal? How can they police this? Because surely where it's got to start with is policing the real estate agents, correct? And making
Yeah,
sure that they're getting an accurate guide of what the seller actually wants to sell the property for.
well, it's fair to say that when the laws were first introduced, the various departments involved, which were fair trading departments in the states, would only go off complaints made by, say, buyers. And the problem is, for many buyers, could they be bothered going through that process of making a formal complaint when fundamentally they may not have lost a lot of money, maybe just a few $100s through getting certain inspections done. But I notice um, that the departments are getting more active. They're going beyond just complaints. They're actively monitoring the market. And it's fair to say that, without talking about it too much, we've been playing our role in this as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, you mentioned the market. How does underquoting affect the property market?
Well, it distorts the market. It creates a lack of confidence in the market as well. And quite frankly, all participants in the market, including real estate agents, want to see greater confidence in the market. And by having a more transparent market and striking out a lot of the dodgy things that happen, you improve confidence in the housing market. That means you'll see more participants in the market, more turnover, which is better for agents. But if you have a situation where there's dodginess in the housing market when it comes to a property transaction, that takes away confidence in the market, that takes away participants in the market. It's really no good for anyone.
Which do you think of the states that are monitoring this? I don't know if you've had a look of which of the states do you feel have the best policies around dealing with this? Obviously,
No question, Victoria and New South Wales. So th- both, from what we can see, uh, both those states now have gone to active monitoring of online listings. And when you think about it, that is a good way to catch the culprits who do this. So I'll give you an example. Let's say, for example, a listing, an online listing has a property going to auction with a price range of $2 million or $2 to $2.2 million. Okay. And let's say on the auction day, the property passes in, doesn't sell at auction. What normally happens after that point is that the seller re-advertises the property as private treaty with the real asking price on there. So in this instance, let's say, for example, the real asking price is advertised at $2.5 million. You've caught them right there and net because they had a price range initially of 2 to 2.2 in the auction. Now they're re-advertising it after the auction 2.5. You've just caught them red-handed.
If you've ever been stung by underquoting yourself, or have any had difficulties in getting a valuation on a property, we actually have a property report at SQM. So it's called My Property Report on our website, and it gives you a valuation, any information you may need about a property that you're looking to purchase. Please visit us and please have a look at My Property Report at sqmresearch.com.au, and we'd be happy to help you out. Until next time.